Hey there, and welcome to my channel. I'm Ashley Willingham, a sinner saved by grace, and an author of clean Christian fantasy romance books filled with adult characters, action, adventure, on-page prayer, and God's truths. You're listening to the free serialized audiobook for Ink and Ivy, my cozy Christian fantasy romance, Book One in the Gracehaven series. Don't forget to like and subscribe. God bless and enjoy.
Chapter 26. Fern's silence was agonizing. For 3 days, every chime of the bakery bell downstairs sent her heart launching straight into her throat, only to plummet sickeningly back to her stomach when the visitor proved to be a neighbor buying a loaf of bread or seeking her herbal expertise, rather than Felix delivering a wax-sealed envelope. Wednesday came and went, with no reply from Fern. Then Thursday. By Friday afternoon, Ivy was rather certain she had driven the poor man off entirely with her desperate pleas. Fool, she berated herself yet again as she stared bleakly at her reflection in the freestanding mirror in Marigold's bedroom. You foolish, desperate goose-cap. She had been entirely too bold with him, too forward. She had begged a man she had never truly met to claim her first dance. She had laid her heart completely bare upon the parchment, just as he had invited her to do. And in return, he had given her nothing but crushing silence. And now she had to paste a smile on her face, swallow the sharp, burning tightness in her throat, and make herself ready for a joyous celebration of love she most certainly no longer wished to attend. Marigold had closed the Honeybloom early that day, locking the front doors right at noon so they would have ample time to prepare for Daphne and Felix's engagement party. And because her best friend's bedroom was significantly larger than hers, it had naturally become their staging ground. Afternoon sunlight filtered through gauzy white lace curtains, pooling warmly over a plush cream-coloured rug that unfurled like a cloud beneath her feet. The air was thick with the ever-present scent of vanilla and the dried lavender marigold kept tucked in her dresser drawers. But Ivy could find no comfort in any of it. She stood before the mirror, clad only in her white cotton chemise and petticoats, her arms wrapped tightly around her middle as she endured the sensation of her stomach roiling in protest at the thought of attending the party. She would happily stay behind tonight and melt into her mattress from sheer mortification. Such a thing would most assuredly be her preference. But she couldn't. Because she was determined to be a good, supportive friend. And good, supportive friends did not shrink from the prospect of an engagement party, even to save themselves from a night assured to be full of utter loneliness. At least sweet Elodie would be in attendance. Perhaps she could just spend the evening with her. Behind her, Marigold and Daphne were already dressed for the evening in their dazzling new finery. Mary shimmered in her buttery yellow gown, the silk swishing softly about her ankles with each step as she fluttered here and there, hunting for ribbons. Meanwhile, Daphne sat perched on the edge of a floral-patterned armchair in her rich purple silk gown, her lips pursed as she surveyed Ivy's sage-green everyday dress pitifully draped across Marigold's bed. "We could borrow one of Grandma Evelyn's nice lace shawls to dress up the shoulders," the fawn gently suggested. "Or we could weave a new ribbon through the bodice," Marigold softly chimed in, returning with her hands full of all manner of ribbons to choose from dark velvet to smooth satin to delicate lace. Ivy kept her brittle smile pinned to her lips, the sort of smile that had no hope of ever reaching her eyes. "Thank you, but there is no point in trying to modify it now. I will just wear it as is." It didn't matter what they added to her poor dress. Positioned alongside her two radiant friends, she would look like nothing more than a drab weed tonight, a woman once more with no prospects. Unwanted, shopless. But perhaps now she and Marigold could become proper spinsters. They could even adopt a whole slew of cats. Not fable cats, of course, just the usual sort of cats. 3 sharp knocks echoed from the front of the apartment. "It's just me," a familiar voice called through the heavy wood. "Grandma Evelyn." Ivy breathed out a quiet sigh through her nose, grateful for the distraction from her pathetic wardrobe, and the hollow ache in her chest. Snatching her cashmere shawl from the edge of Marigold's bed, she wrapped it tightly around her shoulders and hurried out of the bedroom, through the verdant sitting room and straight to the front door. Pulling it open, she found Grandma Evelyn standing on the landing in a gauzy muslin gown, her snow-white hair pinned up in immaculate swoops and her eyes twinkling with suppressed delight. But it was the item the older woman carried in her arms that captured Ivy's full attention. A flat rectangular box tied with an elegant ribbon. A box from the Whitfields' tailor shop. "And I come bearing a very special gift for you, Ivy dear," Grandma Evelyn announced, already stepping past and sweeping deeper into the apartment. Ivy blinked twice, her thoughts sluggishly trying to make sense of this new development. "For me?" She slowly shut the door, her gaze flickering between the box and the older woman. Her stomach clenched further with a sudden wave of guilt. "Oh, Grandma Evelyn, you did not buy me a new dress, did you?" "Not I," Grandma Evelyn reassured, settling the massive box squarely in the centre of the low coffee table. "I am simply making the delivery on behalf of the Whitfields." The rustle of silk announced Marigold and Daphne's hurried arrival. They hovered in the doorway to the sitting room, their eyes going wide as, with a dramatic flourish, the older woman pulled the satin ribbon loose and lifted the heavy cardboard lid off the box before peeling back the crisp white tissue paper with a soft, crinkling whisper. And there, resting perfectly inside the box, was the dress. The dress. The breathtaking burnt copper silk gown she had modelled upon the pedestal in the Whitfields' shop just a few days ago. The rich, fiery fabric practically glowed in the ambient light of the sitting room. Ivy gasped, her hands flying to cover her mouth. But it wasn't just the gown inside the box. Laid carefully across the shimmering skirt was a pair of cream-coloured, elbow-length evening gloves. Tucked into one corner of the box sat a small, heavy velvet pouch with gold drawstrings. Resting in the other corner was a pair of delicate silk dancing slippers, dyed to match the exact perfect shade of copper. But most exquisite of all was the item sitting atop, standing in stark contrast against so much colour, a mere white envelope sealed with a dollop of red wax. "Fern," she breathed, the threat of tears already stinging at the corners of her eyes. Was this magnificent gift truly from him? Hurrying forward, she snatched up the letter first. "Oh!" Marigold exhaled, her wings fluttering as she took a single step further into the room. "What does it say?" Daphne urged, nearly bouncing in place. Clasping her hands before her, Grandma Evelyn watched on with a little smile playing across her lips as Ivy cracked the seal, her fingers trembling as she pulled the single piece of parchment free. Hardly daring to breathe, she devoured the scant few words unfurling across the page in Fern's usual flowing script.
My dearest Miss Ivy, please pardon my wretched silence. How it pained me to not write you back at once, yet I did not wish to spoil this surprise for you. But I pray you will now accept my earnest answer to your requests. Yes, I will be in attendance tonight. I will claim your first dance, and all the dances thereafter, if you will allow me to be so bold with my attentions. For I know that I will be unable to look at anyone but you. Forgive me for not writing more now. There is so much more I wish to say. But as you have said you wish to hear my words in person, I shall endeavour to express myself as eloquently as I can at the party. Every veiled sentiment I carry for you shall be unveiled. I promise I shall make my every intention most plain. And please forgive me for recruiting the Honourable Whitfields into my clandestine activities. They wished to be honest with you from the start, but I longed to keep this present a surprise until this very moment. If only I could see your face. Are you smiling, Miss Ivy? Does the colour please you? Though perhaps I should have asked you which colour you would prefer before I ordered it. Forgive me again for my oversight. But how my pen stumbles today. How my words fail me as the hour of our meeting draws near. Until tonight, I remain. Yours, Fern.
A shaky sigh escaped her lips. For a moment the room swam before her as his parting words echoed through her mind, drowning out all else. Until tonight, I remain yours. It's from him, she confirmed at last for her friends, earning a gasp of pure delight from Daphne. Fern. Marigold stared in wonder at the unexpected present. Grandma Evelyn's smile deepened, her own voice trembling when she whispered, "How happy I am for you, my dear. And how glad I am that Mrs. Whitfield insisted I be the one to deliver it." A quiet laugh burst from Ivy's throat. Her gaze misted over, the warmth of the sitting room blurring into a mere smear of colour before her eyes. Shaking her head, she smiled like a fool as the tears she hadn't let herself shed earlier in the week over her admirer's prolonged silence finally rolled down her cheeks. "He ordered this gown for me," she further explained, her breath hitching on the words. "And he would have had to do so before I wrote that desperate letter to him, before I even asked him if he would dance with me tonight." The realization that he had planned this gift in advance washed over her, sweeping away the agonizing silence of the past 3 days. It hadn't been a rejection at all. It had been a quiet preparation. The crushing humiliation she was sure would be hers. The bitter certainty that she was truly unmoored and unwanted after all. It shattered in a single instant. Fern had anticipated her needs even as she had let herself forget and overlook them. He had even understood her well enough to order the most exquisite dress for her. It was perfect. He was perfect, a radiant, blinding hope ignited in her chest, causing her heart to swell. Tonight, he was going to be there. He was going to dance with her. At last, she would meet her secret admirer. All at once, Marigold and Daphne were pressing in behind her, trying to read Fern's words right over her shoulder. "I promise I shall make my every intention most plain," Marigold quietly read aloud. "Oh!" Daphne gasped. "Oh, Ivy! He's sure to propose." "Propose?" Another laugh burst from her throat at the idea, this one decidedly nervous. "Oh, but surely not," she tried to breathlessly argue, afraid to let herself believe in something so wondrous. She could not yet put a face to his pseudonym, even though she felt as if they knew each other so well already. Grandma Evelyn's eyes crinkled at the corners with her sudden amusement. "In my experience, my dear, a man does not go to so much trouble for a woman unless he harbours a certain, steadfast sort of affection for her. Even if he doesn't intend to propose, he will surely seek your permission to court you in earnest." Her heart leapt at the prospect. Moving as one, Marigold and Daphne gathered her up into a fierce hug, laughter spilling from them both. "Oh, we must get you dressed," Daphne excitedly murmured. "If he proposes tonight, it could be your engagement party too. And then our banns could be read out at the church at the same time. And then we could have a shared wedding." "Your hair," Marigold added, already pulling back to assess Ivy's emerald tresses. "We must style your hair. We only have a few hours left." Ivy stood completely stunned, her mind spinning with all the unknowns this evening might yet hold, even as she tried to simply not float away into the rafters from pure happiness. Mary busied herself, carefully lifting the fiery copper dress, the silk slippers, and the gloves from the tissue paper and draping them over her arms. And all the while, Daphne chattered, ticking things off her fingers as she went. "We must get you dressed, style your hair, and we simply must practice what you intend to say when Fern inevitably asks the question. You simply cannot say yes. It must be something more elegant than that." Chuckling at the chaotic flurry of activity, Grandma Evelyn finally reached into the box and plucked the velvet pouch from the corner. "Now, do not forget to open this as well, Ivy dear," she reminded her, holding the small bag out. "I do believe he might wish for you to wear this as well." With her hands still trembling from her mounting nerves, tonight, she would meet her Fern in only a few hours, Ivy tucked the letter back into the safety of the box and took the velvet pouch instead. She pulled the gold drawstrings loose and tipped the contents into her palm. Out slid a stunning necklace, a single, flawless strand of luminous white pearls. Marigold gasped, "Oh, how stunning! How perfect you shall look!" Daphne let out another squeal of delight, agreeing, Truly, all eyes will be on you tonight." The fawn's words were like a splash of cold water to the face, instantly dousing her ever-rising giddiness. "But it's your party, Daphne," Ivy whispered, her shoulders slumping a little as she glanced between her group of friends. "We are meant to be celebrating you and Felix. We should not be making such a fuss over me." Daphne's expression immediately softened, her smile turning dreamy. "I already have my Felix. His are the only eyes I care to have on me tonight." Grandma Evelyn nodded her agreement, quick to reassure. "A ball is more than vast enough to hold the joy of two celebrations, my dear." But Ivy tried to protest further. Seizing her by the shoulders, Daphne bodily wheeled her around and herded her toward the bedroom, while Marigold happily followed, wings fluttering, her arms still laden with copper silk. Ivy stumbled a step, a breathless laugh escaping her lips despite her racing pulse. She kept her fingers curled tightly around the smooth luster of the pearls in her palm, using their solid weight to ground herself amidst the sudden whirlwind of excitement. This was it. This was happening. Daphne leaned closer, the smile in her friend's voice evident when she murmured against her ear. "And don't worry. By the time Marigold and I are finished with you, this Fern of yours will have absolutely no choice but to confess his undying devotion the very second you step foot in the ballroom." Chapter 27. The rhythmic clatter of hooves on cobblestone finally smoothed into the soft crunch of a gravel drive as the open-air carriage Mayor Halloway had sent to fetch them from the Honeybloom swept through the towering wrought-iron gates of Ashdown Park. Overhead, the setting sun painted the sky in strokes of violet and apricot, casting gilded shadows across the sprawling manicured lawns of the Halloway estate. A balmy evening breeze drifted through the open barouche, carrying the sweet, earthy scent of spring blossoms and the verdant richness of the surrounding gardens. Ahead of them, a long line of other carriages trundled steadily toward the manor house, rising in the near distance. Against the twilight, the Halloway house seemed to glow, its windows ablaze with inviting candlelight. The balmy air and glowing twilight washed over her, but Ivy barely registered any of it. Her vision had already narrowed to a single terrifying point: the front doors, growing closer by the moment. Beneath the fiery silk of her bodice, her pulse hammered out a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Sitting rigidly on her side of the carriage seat she shared with Grandma Evelyn, she worried her gloved hands in her lap. All around her, the gentle hum of conversation flowed continuously between Daphne, Marigold, and Grandma Evelyn, as they chattered about what the evening might hold, and paid compliments to Daphne on the loveliness of the estate. But to her ears, it was nothing more than the distant buzzing of bees. Somewhere beyond those walls, Fern was waiting for her. He was already here, she was sure of it. But what if they did not like each other in person as well as they did on the page? What if the entire reason he had chosen to communicate with her through pen and paper was that he feared he would be too terrifying for her to behold in the flesh? What if he truly were a man like Mr. Croft? A gentle warmth suddenly pressed against her shoulder as Grandma Evelyn leaned over and whispered, "Remember to breathe," just beyond the curve of her ear. Ivy startled before she could catch herself, her muscles drawing taut, her hands crumpling the silk of her skirt. But when she caught the wide-eyed stares of her friends, she forced her shoulders to relax. A breathless laugh escaped from her, one that she hoped might come across as easy and carefree. To her own ears, though, it sounded quite unhinged. "I'm just afraid he will not like me so much in person," she admitted to her friends. "But he is sure to adore you," Daphne reassured her at once. "How could he not?" Marigold was quick to agree. Just as she sought to return their encouraging smiles, the carriage lurched to a halt, and any attempt at a smile she might have managed died on her lips. Her stomach roiled as the driver, a fable fox by the name of Mr. Phineas, leaped nimbly down from his perch and pulled the door open for their descent. Fingers trembling, breath catching, she accepted Mr. Phineas's paw and stepped down to the drive, gravel crunching beneath her new, butter-soft slippers that did not pinch in the slightest. The grand double doors of Ashdown Park stood pinned open to the balmy night, allowing a brilliant swathe of golden light and the tinkling of distant music to spill out across the wide stone steps and the bustling front lawn. The air hummed with the polite chatter of arriving guests, a dizzying sea of well-dressed couples from Gracehaven, Honeygrove and Lindenvale, all converging on the manor at once. A few paces ahead, Mr. and Mrs. Whitfield looked marvellously well-dressed, as they always did. Prim and polished in all their finery, they expertly herded all four of their daughters toward the entrance. At the top of the stairs, Pastor Amos was just visible, passing through the open doors. The silver-haired centaur cut a dignified, steadying figure in his modest brown robe amidst the overwhelming wave of jewels and silks. Swallowing hard, Ivy trailed in her friend's wake, her eyes scanning the crowd ahead as she floated across the drive and up the stone steps, step by step. Moment by moment. Her heart raced all the faster. Her throat grew thick. Her head swam, overwhelmed by the rustling of skirts, the glow of the lanterns, the heavy scent of perfume in the evening air. She forced herself to take a slow, shallow breath, desperately searching for an anchor amidst the rising tide of panic. Fern is here, she reminded herself, a thought both steadying and terrifying. But how would she know it was him? They had not agreed upon any sign. She did not even know what he would be wearing. Mayor Halloway and his wife stood just inside the grand entryway of the manor, offering bright smiles and words of welcome to each of their guests. Beside them stood Felix, his waistcoat the perfect shade of plum, to match Daphne's dress. A rich, deep hue that seemed to catch the candlelight and draw out an even more vibrant, striking red from his auburn hair. As they made their way through the receiving line, the postmaster's gaze fell upon Grandma Evelyn first, and his face lit up with warm recognition for his grandmother. Until he spotted Daphne. The very second the fawn stepped fully into the ambient light of the hall, the man went entirely still. His mouth fell open the slightest fraction as he stared, utterly dumbstruck, at his future wife. A quiet pang lanced through Ivy's chest, even as her heart swelled with joy for her friend. But even so, she could not help but wonder, would Fern stare at her in a similar fashion?
Darling.
The mayor greeted Daphne with a smile and a kiss on the cheek, his tufted ears twitching with his apparent amusement.
I do believe you have rendered poor Felix here speechless.
Mrs. Halloway chuckled. Daphne smiled, positively glowing beneath all the attention. A furious blush crept up the postmaster's neck.
Daphne, forgive me. You are a vision.
He finally managed, stepping forward to offer her his arm.
I do believe I am the luckiest man in all of Gracehaven.
Belatedly, his gaze flickered to the rest of them.
And of course, you look quite well too, Grandma, Miss Ivy, Miss Marigold.
Grandma Evelyn waved him off, her eyes crinkling at the corners. Do not let us distract you from further admiring your fiancé, Felix. We know we all look quite well. Marigold's wings fluttered behind her as she first complimented Daphne and Felix with a soft, "What a handsome couple you two make," before she turned to the mayor and Mrs. Halloway and added, "Almost as handsome a couple as you two, of course." A pleased flush warmed Mrs. Halloway's cheeks. Mayor Halloway beamed, puffing his chest out just a fraction.
You are too kind, Miss Marigold. And Miss Ivy,
he added, his keen gaze sweeping over her attire.
I must say, that copper silk is truly striking on you. You are quite the vision yourself, tonight.
Indeed, Mrs. Halloway agreed, open curiosity colouring the fawn's tone. Most striking. And here I thought Daphne had mentioned you had quite forgotten to order anything new. Daphne ducked her head, her ears flattening against her styled curls. Now, Mama, please. With her pulse spiking further, Ivy threaded her arm with Marigold's and twitched her lips into a hasty smile. You are too generous, Mayor Halloway. Mrs. Halloway, thank you, if you will excuse us. Politely dipping her head, she endeavoured to lead her best friend deeper into the party before the Sun Fae was forced to spend the night paying more compliments to Daphne's parents. Or worse, before they could ask her any pressing questions about the dress. As she and Marigold passed through the entrance hall, climbed the staircase, and finally stepped into the upper gallery that had been converted into a ballroom for the occasion, the sheer scale of the evening rushed up to meet them. Hundreds of beeswax candles flickered in towering crystal chandeliers, casting a warm, shimmering glow over the Halloway family portraits lining the walls and the polished parquet floor underfoot. The air was thick with the scent of spun sugar emanating from a refreshment table along the far wall. And above the din of polite chatter and the clinking of crystal flutes, a string quartet plucked out a lively melody, reminding Ivy of what was to come, her first dance with Fern. Her chest seized at the thought. "Oh, Marigold," she whispered, letting her arm slip from her friend's so she could turn in a slow circle and scan the sea of tailored tailcoats and sweeping skirts undulating all around them, as if she even knew what to look for. Was Fern blonde, red-haired, a brunette? Surely he will seek you out. Mary mused aloud, her golden eyes combing the crowd with equal intensity. Surely you will. Simply know him when you see him.
Looking for someone?
A deep voice rumbled at Ivy's shoulder, nearly making her jump straight out of her dancing slippers. She whirled to face the speaker, and there stood Bastian, a boyish grin splitting his face. Gone was his usual simple attire. For the evening, the dragon shifter had donned a masterfully tailored charcoal tailcoat, a waistcoat of deep burgundy, and a snowy cravat tied with immaculate precision. Standing at attention beside his polished boots was Sir Charles. The fable cat's fur had been groomed to a sleek caramel shine, and strapped around his neck was a handsome leather collar displaying the Medal of Valor he had won during his service in the Troll Wars. Ivy let out a shaky exhale and pasted a bright smile on her face for the two of them. Bastian, Sir Charles, how handsome you both look. Indeed, Marigold was quick to agree. What a smart pair you two make.
And you, Miss Ivy and Miss Marigold, are both particularly radiant this evening, if I may be so bold.
Sir Charles replied in his gentlemanly purr. The smile on Bastian's lips faltered, though, the longer he looked upon her, until his expression finally turned most unreadable. His eyes drifted over the luminous pearls resting against her collarbone, the fine lace, the drape of the copper silk.
Goodness, Ivy,
he murmured at last, a note of genuine awe threading through his voice.
You look stunning.
The stark sincerity of the compliment, completely devoid of his usual brotherly ribbing, sent a sudden flutter of panic straight through her heart. Could it be? Was Bastian the one who had sent the dress? Was Bastian... Fern? Her mind scrambled, desperately searching for any signs she might have missed over the years they had known each other. But no. Surely not. Bastian had never shown her a single ounce of romantic interest before. They bantered like siblings. They had both nearly choked when Daphne had questioned if he was her secret admirer. Before the spiralling thoughts could fully take root and force her to view her friend in an entirely new, terrifying light, Bastian's gaze flicked past her shoulder. His brow furrowed slightly.
Though it seems,
he murmured, his tone returning to its usual good-humoured cadence,
Mr. Vael is rather in a hurry to agree with me.
Ivy turned. Time seemed to slow. The gallery blurred at the edges as Mr. Vael cut a path straight toward her, the crowd rippling around him with each step, instinctively yielding in the face of his otherworldly grace. The heads of several nearby women turned, their eyes snagged upon him, following his every move. But he paid them no heed. His ice-blue gaze remained locked firmly, undeniably, on her. At his side flounced Elodie, a perfect doll in her cornflower blue dress. And for the very first time since she had known the two, the cold man and his sweet daughter were not a matched set in terms of their attire. Instead of blue, that evening Mr. Vael wore a sweeping coat of deep teal that seemed to devour the candlelight. But it was his waistcoat that caused the breath to snag painfully in her throat the longer she stared at it. Pearlescent silk, embroidered with a design of flowering vines. fastened with a gleaming row of polished copper buttons. Copper. The exact hue of her own fiery gown. It was a subtle detail, nothing at all like Felix's blatant plum-coloured devotion to Daphne. But still, the visual harmony between her outfit and his remained. And now a new, far more terrifying thought slammed into her mind, freezing the blood in her veins. Could Mr. Vael possibly be Fern? Chapter 28. No, he couldn't be. Not cold, rude Caelen Vael, who had made it perfectly plain that he had no interest in courtship, nor in taking a wife within moments of their meeting. Finally, the man came to stand before her, and the bustling noise of the party rushed back in. A cacophony of conversation, laughter, and music, all fighting for supremacy within her ears. And yet, she seemed to have no difficulty hearing him when he greeted her with a dark murmur of,
Miss Fairwood,
and offered a shallow dip of his head. Even in the midst of his rigid bow, his eyes never left hers. The sheer intensity of his stare pressed the air further from Ivy's lungs, moment by moment, bit by bit. She blinked, fighting the strange, inexplicable gravity that seemed to emanate from him that evening. It was a losing battle. Even as she commanded herself to look away from him, to let him see how unimpressed she was with him stalking across the gallery in all of his state to greet her, she swayed a fraction of an inch closer, drawn helplessly toward him. For a single disorienting second, she wondered if he had called upon the wind again to physically pull her nearer to him. But the air in the gallery stood perfectly still. There was no breeze to speak of. This terrifying magnetic pull was entirely his own. And all around them, the party clearly took notice. The prickle of several dozen different stares burned the back of her neck. All the unwed ladies of Honeygrove and Lindenvale, the very women who had flocked to Gracehaven that first weekend to catch a glimpse of the wealthy widower, continued to watch him from behind the flutter of their fans. He did not so much as glance their way. His focus remained anchored entirely, exclusively upon her, even at the expense of her companions. Warmth bloomed within Ivy's cheeks as, for one wild, fleeting heartbeat, a treacherous part of her soul delighted in the weight of his stare. And for that singular moment, she allowed herself to entertain the impossible. She allowed herself to wish that Mr. Vael truly were Fern. That the cold, elven man who made her head swim and her pulse leap, despite her best efforts to ignore his very existence, and her gentle admirer who understood her so completely, were one and the same. How intoxicating a thought, that she could be the sole exception to this man's untouchable facade. That beneath his guarded manners and otherworldly allure, he might harbour a heart soft enough to stay awake through the quietest hours of the night, pining for her and only her. But she allowed herself only that moment before quietly snuffing the ridiculous notion out. She could not let herself be swayed now by the mere physical magnetism of a man like Caelen Vael. Not when she had her Fern. Sweet Fern. The perfect balm to her weary soul. Mr. Vael, with his icy glares and impenetrable walls, was a storm she had no desire to weather. A man as rigid and detached from the world as he could never understand her the way Fern did. Her Fern was still out there waiting for her. This was merely a distraction. Her fear from Grandma Evelyn's dinner party realised that Mr. Vael would misunderstand her biting remarks to him as an invitation. Mr. Vael, she managed to return at last, her voice little more than a whisper. Glancing past his shoulder, she skimmed the milling crowd, looking for any hint of some man standing on the fringes, watching her in turn, waiting for a chance to make his introduction. She saw no one. "Oh, Miss Ivy," Elodie gushed, bouncing on the toes of her slippers. "Isn't this just the most wonderful ball? Have you ever seen so many candles? And the music is so pretty. Thank you so much for insisting to Papa that I should be allowed to come. Abigail has even said there are some girls from Lindenvale here she can't wait to introduce me to. Wood elves. I have heard they live high up in the trees. Can you imagine?" At the girls' breathless excitement, Ivy pulled her gaze away from the sea of partygoers. turning her full attention to Elodie. And even though she remained acutely aware of the weight of Mr. Vail's unyielding stare still fixed upon her face, a warm smile blossomed on her lips for his daughter. "It is a most wonderful ball, Miss Elodie," Ivy happily agreed. "And how perfect you look. No doubt you will find the girls Abigail wishes to introduce you to most agreeable." Elodie beamed. "Oh, but I don't look nearly as perfect as you, Miss Ivy. You look just like a princess." With a mischievous flash of a smile that was there and gone so quickly, Ivy could have almost believed she had imagined it. The girl tilted her head up to look at her father with her wide, innocent eyes. "Doesn't she look pretty, Papa?" Unbidden, more warmth flared in her cheeks at the child's question. Reluctantly, she chanced a glance toward Mr. Vail. Clearing his throat, his gaze abruptly pulled away from her to stare steadfastly at a nearby pillar instead, as if he could no longer bring himself to meet her gaze directly.
"You do look quite bright, Miss Fairwood."
Quite bright. Her flush instantly cooled. What manner of bewildering compliment was that? For the span of a few heartbeats, Ivy could only stare at the man before she swiveled a glance toward Marigold instead. Her best friend gave her a sympathetic smile. Sir Charles cleared his throat.
"Well, if you will excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, I do believe I spy Pastor Amos across the room, and I simply must catch up with him. A pleasure, as always."
With a polite flick of his tail, the sleek feline padded away. In the wake of Sir Charles's departure, Bastien let loose with an awkward cough. Suddenly stepping forward, he swept into a theatrical bow before Marigold and declared,
"Miss Marigold, I simply must demand the honor of your first dance."
Righting himself, he offered her his arm. The abruptness of such a bold declaration clearly caught Mary off guard. Rather than offering Bastien an immediate response, she hesitated, her golden eyes darting straight to Ivy. A questioning look wrote itself clearly across her features. Ivy met her best friend's stare, forcing another smile to her lips. "Don't leave me alone with him. Please." That was what she wanted to say. Instead, she swallowed her rising panic and insisted, "What a handsome pair you two will make. Go on. Perhaps I will be able to join you shortly." Fern. Where was Fern? Again, she flicked a glance toward the milling crowd. With a polite nod to Mr. Vail and Elodie, and a sympathetic wince tossed her way, Bastien led Marigold off into the swirling crowd, leaving Ivy entirely alone with the father-daughter pair. The moment stretched. The silence thickened, smothering the lively tempo of the string quartet. Still, Mr. Vail refused to look at her. Instead, he stiffly directed his attention down to his daughter.
"Elodie, why don't you go and see if Grandma Evelyn requires anything from the refreshment table? After which, you are free to rejoin Abigail and meet her friends from Linden Vale, naturally."
Elodie's eyes darted between the two of them, an oddly hopeful smile blooming across her face. "Of course, Papa," the girl happily agreed, skipping off into the crowd without another word. Now it truly was just the two of them. The grand walls of the gallery seemed to shrink inward with each passing moment, pressing the chatter of the party guests and the soaring music into a distant, muffled hum. The air between them grew impossibly thick once more, pulled taut as a bowstring. Mr. Vail's hands remained tightly clasped behind his back. His throat worked in a hard swallow. Unable to bear the stifling weight of him holding her hostage in this silent standoff any longer, Ivy pasted a strained smile onto her lips and bobbed a shallow curtsy. "If you will excuse me, Mr. Vail, I fear there is someone I am supposed to be meeting." She managed exactly one step backward.
"Wait."
The word punched out of him, sharp, frantic. Before Ivy could even process the breach in his usual icy composure, he reached out. His fingers caught hers, halting her retreat with sudden urgency. It was the very first time he had ever touched her of his own accord. No crashing into him because she wasn't watching where she was going. No gust of wind plucking her up before she fell in the woods, or her clinging to his arm to show Mr. Croft he was no threat. just the supple, expensive kid leather of his glove pressing firmly against the silk of her own. Yet despite the layers of fabric separating them, a startling warmth flared at the point of contact. It shot straight up her arm, sending her pulse into another wild, frantic rhythm. Ivy froze, not daring to move, unable to breathe. But just as quickly as he had captured her, Mr. Vael let her go, snatching his hand back and returning to his rigid stance. Like that, he blurted out,
"May I have the honour of your first dance, Miss Fairwood?"
That treacherous part of her heart flared to life once more. Mr. Vael, cool, mysterious, insufferable Mr. Vael, had just asked her to dance. A beat later, a cold wave of guilt flooded her veins. This wasn't how the evening was supposed to go. She had already promised this dance to Fern. Panic fluttered in her throat. She needed to refuse Mr. Vael. She needed to say no. But as she looked up into his marble-sculpted face, she knew she was trapped. She could not possibly reject the most eligible bachelor in Gracehaven, perhaps in all of southern Luminara, without causing a scene. To refuse a dance with him and then immediately search out another man would be an unbearable insult. It's simply a dance, she rationalized, her mind scrambling to make sense of her heart's easy submission to this abrupt change of plans. She was not being fickle, she was just adhering to good manners. Nothing more. She would find Fern the moment the music ended, offer her deepest apologies, and gladly grant him her second dance. And her third. And her fourth. Surely he would understand. "You may," she whispered. She could do this. It was just one dance. Wordlessly, Mr. Vael stepped closer and offered her his arm. Breathing out a shaky exhale, she lifted her trembling hand and rested it in the crook of his elbow. But the moment her palm settled against the rich, teal fabric of his coat, the moment his scent enveloped her once more, the gallery around them completely vanished. Ink, dark chocolate. She was back in her bedroom, left basking in the flowing script of Fern's lovely letters, indulging in another of the decadent pastries he had baked just for her. Her heart lurched against her ribs. She tightened her grip on the solid, unyielding strength of the elven man's arm beneath her fingertips, trying to ground herself in the moment. But even as she walked arm in arm with Caelen Vael, the ghost of Fern was suddenly, impossibly, everywhere.